Okay. Hello and welcome to Muse Jam session recording 194. My name is Dani Beaumont. This is our first combined jam session with Facebook Live. So the tool that we use to screen share, that I use, is called Zoom. And this is going to be a simultaneous sharing session, which is pretty exciting. I'm going to attempt to keep an eye on questions that you might post to the Facebook Live instance. Huh. Hold on, I'm going to do that. I'm going to attempt to keep an eye on questions that come up in the comments area of Facebook Live. I'll be somewhat successful in that. We'll see how it goes. The focus for this week's jam session is kind of taking things down to some of the basics with Muse, really understanding how the Muse application allows you to publish content in different ways to different locations. So if you're new to Muse, you probably know a little bit about the tool. It allows you to come in and build complete websites without having to write any code. Those sites, once they're created, there are a number of different ways that you can view that website content and share it with other people. And we're going to kind of slow things down and take us through each of those individual steps. So I have a site that, for those of you that follow my jam sessions, you're familiar with it. It's a rowing website, kind of a high school rowing team in my town, and I maintain it. I spend about 5 hours a week updating content on the site for the team. It is hosted on GoDaddy. It is hosted in a place that I basically inherited. So when I joined the team as a parent volunteer, I went ahead and picked up the existing website that they had, rebuilt it in Adobe Muse, and used their existing hosting platform. I think it's kind of interesting because I'm going to show you some attributes about that truth. But let's kind of step back a little bit more and get a little more basic. So if I were to pull down on File to New Site and create a website, let's come in. We're going to do the oh so famous simple Hello World. So dummy site I'm working on, Hello World. Of course, because it's Muse, I might have to use an attractive typeface, perhaps. Oh, attractive enough. They say, oh, Dani, don't start with the design stuff. Okay. And let's say this was a finished design. It's all I really needed, but I just kind of want to get it in a place that I can work with. As I mentioned, there are different ways that you can view the site that you're working on and share it. The first one would be simply to preview it for myself. So if you're not a coder and you are curious about the code that Muse generates, it's awfully nice to just see as you're going along how things evolve with your design. So I've gone in, I've created a website. If we go out to the site plan, it's a one-page website. There's really not much to it. I want to now see what this looks like in a browser with code. To do that, I'll come on in, and I'm going to select one of 4 different workspace layouts here. You'll notice I've got Plan, Design, Preview, and Publish. The plan mode allowed me to plan out my site structure. It's a single page design. Design mode, I went in and added that text. The second, or the third step, I guess, along there is I have the ability to preview from within the app. I'll be honest, I'm not as much a fan of previewing in the app. It's kind of limited in controls. There's not a previous and a next button. It doesn't really simulate a browser well enough for my personal taste. So I tend to preview actually in the browser running on my machine by selecting Preview in Browser. And to do that, I'll pull down on File to preview either the entire site or the page that I'm currently working on. So when I select that, what Muse does is it generates all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for this particular page. Obviously, it's a whole lot of not much, but I can see it's here in the browser. I can see that I'm on that home page. You'll notice the URL here is kind of interesting. This is something known as localhost. It is running on my local machine, and it's publishing to a browser on that local machine. So no one, if you're not sharing your screen, pretend I'm not sharing my screen with you. No one would be able to see what I have here. It's private to me alone. Now, as I'm working, I may want to test different browsers. And Muse is going to always default to the default browser on your machine, the one you set as a primary browser. But I may want to see how it looks on other devices, or sorry, other browsers in this case. I can always come in and copy this URL in the browser and jump to a different browser, let's say Firefox. I can bring that up, and entering that same kind of localhost URL, I can view the same page in a different browser. So we'll give it a second to load up here. Okay. Probably was a little quick on loading that up, but I can now see it in a different browser, and things might look different, as you know, between browsers. It's a good way to test. But the test that I'm running, as I mentioned, is local to my machine. If I were to right click here and view page source, I can see the code that Muse generates for a page. Now I have only a little bit of text, and there's a whole lot of what is just common across all pages for Muse that are being rendered here in this code view. But it is real HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code that's being rendered into the browser. Let's say I thought this was the most perfect hello world ever, and I was ready to actually publish this up to my next step, to a hosting platform that I can use, let's say just to experiment. So in this second instance, I'm not ready to go live on the web yet. I kind of want to keep it under wraps. I want to make sure that search engines like Bing and Google don't crawl around and find this site. Let's say I'm working on the design for my client, and I just want that client to be able to look at the changes as I make them and interact with a live site so they can test what the experience would be like. The next step for publishing for me would be to create a trial using Adobe's Business Catalyst hosting platform. The way the story goes is about probably 7 or 8 years ago, Adobe acquired a hosting company called Business Catalyst. And in some ways, we really thought initially that Muse would be just an on-ramp to everyone hosting on Business Catalyst. Many people do. It's actually one of the popular hosting platforms for Muse. A good percentage of Muse customers use it. But in many, many cases, like me with my rowing website, I couldn't tell my client where to host their site. And as a parent, I'm going to be off the committee in about 6 months. So I don't want to be responsible for the hosting for the rest of my life. I want them to keep their own hosting and hand it over to another parent someday. So allowing me with Muse to be able to publish to their existing hosting platform was a really important feature for me. In the interim, though, if you are working on a design and you want to create a trial and you don't want search engines to find it, Business Catalyst is an excellent way to do that. So assuming my design was done here, what I want to do is go to the fourth workspace layout, one known as Publish. Notice on the right-hand side of Publish, you have choices about how you'll publish that out. So I can publish to an FTP host. This is basically third-party hosting like Media Temple, Bluehost, GoDaddy, any of those FTP-compatible hosting platforms. I could also use the Adobe Business Catalyst hosting platform to create my trial. And then lastly, I can go in and export to HTML. For this trial mode, for just this test, I'm going to select Business Catalyst. Now, Business Catalyst, as I mentioned, is a hosting platform. It allows you to create trials. The trials by default, though, are going to be part of a subdomain. And I'll show you what that means in just a second here. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. It's going to use my Adobe ID credentials. So I need an active Adobe account. I could have a free trial of Muse and create one of these temporary sites on Business Catalyst. I don't have to be a paid subscriber, but I do need to have an Adobe ID. When I hit the next button, it's going to log into that hosting platform for me, Business Catalyst, and it's going to ask me to come up with a name. What you want to note is that the name, see how it says in parens here, blank. The name that I choose is going to be a subdomain of businesscatalyst.com. So I may already own a domain somewhere out there. I can use the name here. It's going to always append that name, though, with Business Catalyst. So we could call this Hello World, which I'm sure somebody's already done. So Hello World 02, which is kind of funny, which means that somewhere somebody has already created a subdomain of Hello World. Let's try to be a little trickier just to be funny. We'll try Hello World, haha, not funny enough. How about hello world, it's me. So I've gone in now and created what I consider a friendly subdomain. And notice that it's going to append that name to businesscatalyst.com. If I roll out the options here, I also have the ability, if I have created a trial in the past and I want to use that trial to test a new site, I can go and see all of the trials that I've created. Now, as a Muse product manager, I've created a lot of them. I'm going to stick with Hello World, it's me. Notice there's also an option for data centers. This may or may not be that relevant. If you are pushing up a trial site that you intend to upgrade and actually host on Adobe Business Catalyst, you may want to choose a data center that's in your part of the world. So let's say I'm designing a site for a Japanese client. I can host the site in Australia, which is near the Asia Pacific region, and would probably load more quickly in that part of the world if the clients were in that part of the world. Automatic's fine for me for now. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And Muse is going to go in and create this temporary site, and it's going to publish the content for the site up. Now, we talk about these sites being temporary. They are out there. They do not, I guess Adobe reserves the right to go ahead and delete older trials that you may have, that we may have out there. For the moment, though, those trials stay live. They don't really delete. So kind of for the end of time, until I decide I want to come and delete this manually, this site is now live. So hello world, it's me.businesscatalyst.com is out there and it's live. I could copy this URL. I could give it to a colleague to let them look at the design. I could give it to my client and let them look at the design. It's going to always have this businesscatalyst.com domain associated with it, though. So let's say I went through and I fleshed out my design a little bit further. And I wanted to, I'm kind of thinking to myself here a little bit. Let's say it was finished. Let's imagine it's a beautiful design. And my client has signed off on it. And I want to go ahead and use Adobe's hosting for my site. Now, about 3 years ago, I'll say to be safe, it could have been 2.5 years ago, Adobe changed their policy around the Creative Cloud and hosting sites on Business Catalyst. If you signed up for the Creative Cloud more than, let's play it safe, more than 2 years ago, your Creative Cloud license includes with it up to 5 free upgrades to paid sites on Business Catalyst. It's a very basic hosting site, but you can upgrade your site for free and point a domain that you will purchase using some other domain purchasing tool to post it up to the Business Catalyst hosting platform. Now, my buddy Krista on our social team is sharing questions here, so I'm going to try to look at my phone while we do this. So it looks like Christian Williams has a question, how to look at more templates in Muse. I'm going to save that to the end, but go ahead and if Krista can toss me those questions, I'll keep an eye on them. And if they're specific to what I'm doing, I'll jump on it. If not, I will promise I will answer that question towards the end of the session. Okay, so I have this site. Let's say I have an older Creative Cloud account, or I want to spend, I think it's about $5-6 a month to upgrade this to a paid site. What I want to do is go to that URL, hello world, it's me.businesscatalyst. In fact, let's go swing back into Muse. I want to check something out here a little bit. Back in the Muse application, notice there's a share button. This was grayed out before I published to Business Catalyst, but it's now enabled. And if I click on it, we give you some nice friendly information here. So I can see that my trial site is live, and it's live on the Business Catalyst hosting platform. I could come copy this link. This is handy if you do create a lot of trials and you have trouble remembering what site was associated with the trial. And you can also notice I have the ability to access website editing or in-browser editing. That's kind of good. I'm going to go back now to this URL that I have. And instead of index.html, I'm just going to type in the words admin. And I'll hit return. This is going to let me log into the back-end hosting of Business Catalyst. I'm going to log in with my Adobe ID, hopefully, and I'll sign in. Now, this is that brand new trial. I just created it maybe 10 minutes ago. And there are some basic bits of information that I get as part of this trial. One thing you'll notice is that there's a graph here. And this can be pretty terrific, actually. It shows you the traffic to your site. You can come in and define the range of time you want to see. There are some pretty reasonable, pretty nice, kind of like Google's analytics in a more simpler, I would say more approachable way to really see what's going on with a site, whether it's a trial or it's something you've pointed a domain to. Notice that it's saying that my site is not launched yet. I can come in and launch that site. And when I click the launch site option, notice what it says to me. My Creative Cloud membership has reached its limit. That means I've used the 5 free slots that I got with my Creative Cloud account, which I've had for about 12, well, since we've had Creative Cloud, which is about 7 years. If you are new to Adobe Creative Cloud, if you signed up in less than 2 years ago, you'll probably see a similar message that's asking you to go ahead and give them a credit card and proceed to check out on that site. I'm going to hit cancel and I'm going to change things a little bit just to show you some more options. I have another site that I do host on Business Catalyst, Nomad Dreamers. I was there a little earlier this week to make some updates there. I'm going to log in now to that other site because I want to show you a site that's been live for a while and some of the information that you do get from that dashboard. I'll go ahead and sign in. Carefully with the correct login. See, wonder if it's getting mad at me logging in more than once. Let's try this again. We shall be patient. Really patient. Not that patient. Let's go see if we can go around this a little bit. I'm going to try a different browser. I may have confused Adobe a little bit here. It's because I have company. It's only when you have other people watching. And I'll sign in again. Looking a little better. Let's close this guy out. Okay. So Nomad Dreamers, as it loads up here just a little bit more. Part of my fear of using Facebook Live and the internet and Zoom is that it may have a little bit of network issues. All right, so Nomad Dreamers is a site. I created it as a trial. You notice it says Nomad Test right here. That was the name of the trial when I was just building the site. It's got some nice healthy traffic. It looks like we're getting between 400 and 500 hits each day. And I can come in and examine some of those attributes as I stop in to see, for example, different reports, to see how many visitors I've had, where those visitors are coming from, what my specific traffic sources are. I also have the ability to come in and under site settings. This guy's being pretty darn sluggish, so I want to limit a little bit what I'm doing here. So here's some of the reports. I can see which part of the world is looking at the site. This is one of our demo assets that shows off widgets, so it's got some pretty broad appeal. If I click on site settings, what you'll notice is that I can come in and associate a domain. So if I went to that Hello World site and I was ready to upgrade it to a paid site, I could give the credit card details, and then I would come in and point any domain that I purchased to this Business Catalyst hosting instance. So what I did when I wanted to develop Nomad Dreamers is I went out to GoDaddy, I bought the domain, and on the GoDaddy servers, I went in and I put hosting details that point the domain to Business Catalyst. So if this, I'll be honest, I find hosting to be the greatest mystery ever. I spend a lot of time on the phone with GoDaddy, and I swear every time I call, I talk to a different technician and get very different details about how to take care of all the domains that I have. But what you'll want to do is, if you have a site that you want to host on Adobe's Business Catalyst, there are some good step-by-step tutorials on the Business Catalyst side. And also GoDaddy will give you details, or Bluehost or Media Temple, any of these hosting platforms that you're working with. At the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is come in and point the domain to Business Catalyst using some name servers, and that allows it to make that connection. Depending on how much you know about the web and hosting, you can come in and change some other attributes here. For example, MX records. You may want to have your mail be handled by Business Catalyst, or you may want to use a different hosting platform for your mail client, and you can come in and set those attributes. So at this point, we've gone in and talked about how to preview in the browser, how to come in and create a temporary site that'll just be out there with the businesscatalyst.com domain. We've also talked about how to push that site live on Business Catalyst and point your purchased domain towards that site. Let's talk about a little bit more about another world, I guess. I'm going to close this guy out, and we'll go back to, actually, let's go back to the other site that I have, the rowing website that I maintain. So this is a site, as I've mentioned, that I maintain on a regular basis. I went in originally and I created a trial on Business Catalyst. And whenever I make big changes to the site, although it's live, I tend to publish to the Business Catalyst platform as a trial, just to test any work that I'm doing. So yesterday I made a lot of changes, for example, to the middle school page here. And because this is a responsive site and there's a whole lot of details, I wanted to let my clients see it before I push the changes live. So the way that I tend to do that is I'll come in and make major changes, and then in the publish dropdown here, I'll, instead of pointing to the FTP host, I'll select Business Catalyst. And when I click OK, what you'll notice is Muse usually will remember what I've done in the past. So I switched that to be pointing to Business Catalyst as a trial, and you'll notice I've got a name here. It's called PRC-stage, and this is where I stage out changes for the rowing site. I have the ability at this point to come in and point to a different trial if I'd like. Let's talk a little bit also about some of the options that you have when you're publishing. You have the ability to publish to a folder on a server. This can also be really powerful as you're managing how you create sites and work with clients. If you ask me, I have two options for how I can create a test version of my site to show my client. I personally choose to use Business Catalyst for my trials, and I'll push that up and I'll give my client the PRC stage.businesscatalyst URL for them to say, yep, changes look good, go ahead and push it live. At that point, instead of publishing to Business Catalyst, I publish using the FTP tool. If instead you don't really want to deal with Business Catalyst, a nice trick that web developers tend to use is they will actually create trials or temporary sites, and they'll publish to a subfolder below the root level of the site. So in this example, let's say that my site was live and it was on Business Catalyst, prc.com, let's say. I can come in and create a temporary instance by just hitting something like /stage, /, I think I need that second one. What will happen is the entire site and all of its hierarchy from index.html on down is going to publish to a subfolder. So for my client, it could be the same domain. They're just going to take a look at that in the subfolder. In this instance, I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel. I could go ahead and update my temporary site by pulling down on publish, making sure it points to Business Catalyst, clicking OK, and uploading the entire new changed site. When the client says it's all good, I could go in then and then push it to my FTP client. I'll go ahead and hit cancel. And Now that I have finished changes, let's say client said it was all good, we're ready to go, I can pull down on publish, and this time instead of Business Catalyst, I'm going to select FTP host. When I click OK, it's going to connect to my hosting platform. Now, what you'll notice is it automatically logs right in here to show me the URL that I'm pointing to. So this is the domain that I bought with GoDaddy. I can choose what I want to have upload. So let's talk a little bit about FTP for a moment and give it a little bit of context. So FTP, File Transfer Protocol, is a means by which you can reliably upload, securely and reliably upload content to a hosting platform. And for a while, Muse shipped without built-in FTP. We encouraged you to use third-party FTP tools. We found it was really important, though, to build FTP into Muse for a reason, and that is that Muse keeps something known as a manifest. And the manifest is kind of an internal list of everything that we have changed in the Muse site since the last time you published. And that manifest does a comparison with your hosting platform. So if I want to, I can say, you know what, this is a 25-page website. I've made changes to only one page. I want Muse to do a diff or search for differences between the remote instance and the local instance, and Muse should only publish what has changed, what I've updated. And the way I tell Muse that I want to do that is in the upload dropdown here, I select only modified files. That manifest that Muse keeps will keep track of everything. If you try to use your own FTP tool, you'll find, I think, that sometimes things get messy because Muse changes files that you wouldn't expect. You might be, hey, I'm only going to change page 26 on this site. Let me just upload the FTP attributes for just page 26. I encourage you to use our built-in FTP tool because there are a lot of little things. Perhaps it's a global CSS file or some JavaScript file off on the side that you don't know to update that can cause you problems as you go along. If you have trouble when you publish and things don't seem to be lined up, things for some reason aren't updating, you can always go ahead and select all files for the FTP upload. And that will, in essence, delete everything that's up there and upload a fresh set of content across the entire site to that hosting platform. I also have the ability here, as you'll notice, to create a folder on the server. So as I mentioned, if I didn't want to change pacificrowingclub.org yet, I could put a / here and say temp or stage, and then have everything published there. In the URL, you would add the /temp / index.html, and that will end up taking you to the landing page of the site. Let's talk about some of the other aspects of this site. You'll notice that I'm presented with this screen. This is actually not the first screen that you see the first time you upload to a site. So let me go ahead and hit cancel, and we'll go back to our very beautiful Hello World site. If I came to publish here and I selected FTP host, the first screen that I'm presented has to do with the handshake or the FTP protocols that are going to be used to talk to your hosting platform. And this is where you need to do a little bit of research. When I hosted with GoDaddy, I looked on their site to find out what were the FTP attributes that they expected in order to handshake with the tool. There's an interesting aspect of hosting that I've learned also with GoDaddy. Actually, we can go back to the other site. Don't get dizzy. I'm having trouble making up my mind here. I'm going to go back to the full site that's already live, and I think I can get away with this. I'm going to go to the FTP host, and we'll select Publish. I'll click OK. And next, as I mentioned, it takes me to that second screen. Muse will automatically remember your FTP attributes unless you check a box saying don't remember it. This is incredibly important because once you get it right, you really don't want to figure it out again. I'm going to click on Switch Account, which takes me to the first screen that you would see. I'm going to look at Krista real quick. Looks like we're good. These are the details that are necessary to handshake with the hosting platform GoDaddy. So that's my FTP server. Username is rowing, password I can't tell you. If I go to the options drop down, there's some interesting choices here. Notice above it, I've got store credentials. So if I did not check that box, the credentials would not be saved with the file. If I'm afraid of security and putting this file on a shared drive, I can always keep those credentials separate. Notice under the options area here, I can choose the method of FTP that I want to work with. Now, this is specific to the hosting platform and what they support, but there are different ways that I can work with either FTP or secure FTP and the means by which I actually handshake with that hosting platform. Now, if you don't know the answer to the question, we have a nice feature here called Auto Detect. Notice the choices that are here. Auto Detect is going to handshake with your hosting platform and then test which of these options are available to FTP to that hosting platform. Notice that on GoDaddy, they support FTP and FTP over SSL. They do not support secure FTP with this particular hosting flavor that I have with them. I think they do. This is kind of an old hosting account. I do want to mention something that I found out, which is GoDaddy specifically. I don't know about other hosting platforms. The service gets really annoyed if you do this auto detect thing an awful lot. So sometimes they've got to try to figure out if they're being attacked by someone. And one of the ways they test that is if people continue to try to log in a lot of different ways in a short period of time. So what GoDaddy explained is go ahead and try this. If you're not successful, give it maybe 15 minutes, half an hour, and then try again. They're doing it to protect themselves from attacks. And I think that could be one of the concerns with auto detect. Now that I know what FTP methods work, I can switch from, in fact, I think it already is. Notice that it says FTP here. It's connecting by one known method. So after you use auto detect, sticking with a method that works for that hosting platform can probably allow you to avoid any sort of spam attack protection stuff. I then hit the next button. It will basically initiate that handshake with the hosting platform. And this is where I can decide what the site URL is, the folder that I'm working on, and how I upload those files. Now, the site URL here, interestingly enough, notice that first off, there's a plus sign. You can add more than one URL. The purpose for this URL, I'm going to go back for a moment. Notice how I already told it pacificrowingclub.org. That's the FTP server. So it knows where to publish it. In that second screen, this is actually used for something very different, something known as a sitemap. So whenever you publish a site from Muse, whether or not you're publishing it to Business Catalyst, a third-party hosting platform, or really just publishing to a folder to give to some coder types that take responsibility for pushing your site live. In all those instances, Muse generates something known as sitemap, sitemap.xml. The sitemap is one of the major ways that search engines determine how often you update your site. So updating your sitemap indicates to those search engines that there's new content on the site. It lets that engine know that it should go crawl those pages to determine what's changed and what's new about it. But when we generate that sitemap, we need to include the URL or the domain that you're using for the site that you're hosting. All right, we're going to look at that a little bit more in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because I think we've beat this one dead. That's the way that you'll use the third-party hosting platform. The other thing that I do want to mention is, let's say you work with a team and you're an interaction designer. I have a client. His name is Aaron Lawrence. He's my buddy, and he works only about 4 blocks away from here at Pivotal Labs here in San Francisco. I like having him in my life. He's taught me an awful lot. But one thing that's really interesting is he works at a design development shop. There's about 12 designers and about 200 coders in his shop. And he and some other designers use Muse to build out interactive prototypes, to mock up user experiences, to put in front of clients to validate that the feature set is intact. And then when he's done, he hands his site over to a team of about 6 engineers that spend about 6 months, yes, 6 months to build out that site by hand. The types of sites we're talking about are so sophisticated and hosted on such vast systems, it's appropriate for those hand coders to go out and build the site by hand rather than use Muse. I can see that. But the beauty of the relationship for Aaron is that he uses Muse to build out a fully interactive prototype, validate it with his clients, and then know that exactly what he's giving the developers are A, going to make the customer happy, and B, are specified in a really good way. And the way that he can do that is to give them the live site, but he also gives them a directory of files that they can use. So let's take a look at the files that are generated when you do save out a site on your local directory. I'm going to come into Publish, and this time I'm going to select Export as HTML. I'll click OK. Notice it's still relying on that URL, so that's going to be important for my sitemap that's going to be generated. I'm going to go ahead and select a good location here. Let's just put it on my desktop. And I'll go ahead and select that folder, and I'll click OK. So Muse, once again, is going to go off and generate all of the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript for this site. Now, the thing that's interesting to me is if you are a developer and you do want to tweak what we render from the Muse application, there's some real wins in looking at this export folder as you go forward. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to my desktop and kind of take a peek, even though it's still generating the content. Maybe. Might be a little peeking a little bit earlier here. See where Muse is at. Give it a little bit more time. All right, I'll tell the answer of what it's going to tell me in just a second. So I'm going to get in this folder, I'm going to get some HTML pages. And the HTML, of course, is the code that will render in the browser. I'm also going to get a folder of CSS files, cascading style sheets. This has a lot to do with the styling that I'm applying to my site. So what typefaces do I want to work with? What kinds of colors am I working with? Do I have gradients in my design? Looking at the CSS can often be code that a developer can use to actually go in and take your work further. This is sure taking its time to re-upload here, isn't it? Mm-hmm. That's how the demo gods go. We'll let that work at it. Just a little bit more. So I get a folder of CSS. I also get a folder of images. And you say to yourself, but Dani, why don't you just give them a whole bunch of source images? Developers don't necessarily have an eye for design. And if you do have an eye for design, you may very precisely place images, crop images, subsample the image so that it looks really good in the browser on both high DPI devices and low res devices. Allowing Muse to handle the export to a folder will assure that those images are optimized for the web. We'll take things like PNG files, and if they have a transparent background, we'll make sure there's a PNG. If they have a fill to their background, we usually save those out as JPEG so that we can make them as small as possible and optimize the content. If you're, see how I can fill time? I've still got, what is this, 44 seconds or 44% to go up. In addition to PNG and JPEG files, I can trust that Muse will do a high DPI instance of my sites. So if you choose to do high DPI, you'll end up with an image that's twice the height and twice the width, basically twice the resolution as the normal standard screen resolution. Figuring out those 2x instances can be complicated to make sure you set them to the right resolution and size, and Muse is going to automatically do that for you. I'm running out of small talk to have here, so let's go look at that folder. Let's see. desktop folder. We've got test me. Really? Maybe I didn't put it in the folder. Did anybody check me on that? Nope. All right. We'll wait for you, Muse. I'm going to stop and look at any questions that came through from Krista because a watched progress bar will never really finish. So Eric asks, can I export for HTTPS and not only HTTP, the site? The answer is yes. As you saw in those FTP attributes, you can do secure FTP or just standard FTP. It depends on the hosting platform that you're working with and the settings that are there, but we do support secure HTTPS, which is basically the secure instance. So question, Madi says, Google tells me some of my images can be compressed to make the site load faster. Will Muse be able to compress the images like WordPress? There might have been a second question there. Oh, got lots of questions. So I think we covered that a little bit. The fact that when you publish your site, either via FTP or to a folder, Muse is going to optimize those images so that they load more quickly. If you know what you're doing, you can use tools like Photoshop or Fireworks even, and see as you change things like your JPEG compression or your PNG file format, what it does to the image. You can always go in and hand optimize them, but Muse does do a good job, and we're always improving the job that we do around optimizing those images for you. So you can trust that Muse will do that, whether they put it in a folder or not. So I think it's Lordinas is talking about basically responsive design and breakpoints and optimizing images across that. What I would say is do me a favor. I did a jam session 2 weeks ago, and it was all about how many breakpoints you have, optimizing your design, and really dealing with the question that you're asking. So I'm going to defer to the recording that I did 2 weeks ago. It's up on YouTube. You can also access it on Facebook. I think we get into that as far as how many breakpoints you need, why you need them, what it does to your design and such. All right, I'm going to go back to that lovely folder because I'm sure it's full by now. Okay, it is. So here's my content, as I mentioned. I've got a folder of assets. These are all my optimized images. These are also assets that I can, actually they're not the optimized images. These are any files that I am using. For example, a downloadable PDF file. I have on the landing page of the site, there is a full screen background video. That's the video that gets uploaded. That's the version of, the second one is the version of the video that's for Android browsers. So all of the files that are uploaded, we're going to talk about assets in just a second and how you can deal with those. Then I'll have the HTML. There's the CSS that I mentioned. Your developer may want to go in and look at that CSS and pull what they'd like from it. The images, as I mentioned, that are optimized, these are all those optimized images. And depending on what you've done, Muse is very intelligent. Sometimes we use HTML to crop an image or to scale an image. If that isn't possible, we'll render a second instance of an image. So notice I've got a map here to get to the boathouse. And because I'm using multiple breakpoints, we're actually rendering different maps. So it depends on, as I mentioned, Muse is pretty intelligent. It's going to cache and reuse images and use HTML as much as possible to crop, rotate, and scale the size of the image. But in some instances, it's going to create multiple images. So just a nice place to rely on. If I go back out from the images folder, you can see the sitemap.xml. So there's, just to kind of be thorough here, sorry I'm jumping around today, scripts will have some JavaScript code in here if you're someone who wants to look at that JavaScript. And then there's the sitemap. So if I expand the sitemap, let's do that again so I can see it. What you'll notice is that in the sitemap, we talk about all of the pages on the site. Notice there's a last mod here. Oops, now I've done it. I didn't really want to open that. And Dreamweaver, no. Danny, you never said we were going to use Dreamweaver today. Go away. Let's just open it up here one more time. Okay. Notice that in the sitemap, it delineates each page and it has a last mod date. I think I mentioned that I was mucking around with 2 pages yesterday. Notice that most of these have not been edited since the 28th of October, but lo and behold, the coaches page got modified on the 25th of January, for example. So this is what those search engines are going to look for and want to know if changes have been made. Okay, I want to talk about pretty much one other topic here that I think is interesting around how we handle files and how they're uploaded. It's kind of a bit of a backdoor. If you are experienced with Muse, I think you'll start to find ways to be playful around this. I'm going to go into a page that actually is kind of a placeholder here. It doesn't have a whole lot of anything on it, obviously. Let's say I do know a lot about the web and I want to work with some embed code tricks to make sure that certain files are available. Again, this is just for people that know the web and are not necessarily satisfied with everything that Muse offers, and they want the ability to upload additional files to the hosting platform easily without having to use a third-party hosting platform. There's a couple ways you can upload files. One is, let's say I know I want to have some files available. So this might be flyer for our new event. Let's just try open house flyer. Let's try something we can see. So I know I want to include a flyer and I want to make it available. I can come to this word open house flyer and I can go to my hyperlinks dropdown and I can always scroll down to the files area and I can link to a file. So I can go off and say, great, I'm going to go ahead and grab that flyer. I know on the desktop in the test me folder, I've got close enough. We've got the flyer. So I select that and it now is linked to the site. And when I publish the site up, it's going to grab that file for sure. Let's say I'm looking to do something a little more edgy. I've got some embed code or I've got a widget from a third-party hosting or a third-party widget developer that I want to access. You can always kind of create a directory of files that you'll use for kind of whatever reason, simply by nothing selected on the canvas here, pulling down under File to add files for upload. I can then go in and grab any files that I want, select those, and upload them. Let me show you this a little bit more simply. I've got my hello world here, and I know I want to include a couple of files. I don't want to reference it anywhere in the site design, but I'd like to use them. I can pull down on File then, go to Add Files for Upload, grab a few of these, click Open. Again, they're linked to nothing on the site, but the way I can tell that they're there is if I go into the Assets folder now. Notice that the Assets folder indicates that there are some files to be uploaded here that I can push up along with my site. Talking about that a little bit more, let me just kind of extract this or get into this just a little bit more. If I go to the word hello and I wanted to link to that, I'm going to come in and browse to a file. So a different file here. Kind of want to just show you something here. I'm going to go to the word world, and I'm going to go ahead and link to something different again. So I'll go on in and link to file. I don't want to pick anything too ginormous, but let's go for an image. It's kind of big, but a little image, still pretty big. It's an incredibly small image, 5 megs, still pretty big. Okay, so I've gone in and I've linked to one downloadable file, a PDF. I've linked to another file, And if you notice in the, let's just take a look here, in the Assets panel, I've got all the files that I linked to. There's that GIF file. I've also got the PDF files that I either under File uploaded or I linked to them here. The reason why I want to mention this is you may say, okay, Dani, this is great, but what if I have a mess? What if I've gone in and I've got so many files that things are confusing now? I went in and added a couple files and I no longer want them, or I've linked to a file and I just want to make sure it's not there any longer. So I might come in and say, oh, hello, lovely. So I don't tend to know how to spell. Pew. And let's just keep an eye on this. The word world is linked to this GIF file. If I go in and delete that file, notice something kind of tacky happened. There's a file. I may have published this in the past. It uploaded because it was linked there. It's no longer linked, but I've got this kind of heavy file. If you want to clean up your site, if you think you've linked to files you no longer need, you can come in and in the Assets panel, if you right click, I think, let's try this. Yeah, if you select anything in the list pretty much and right link, you can select delete unused files for upload. So this is the sort of, oh, by the way, if you went to browse for a file and upload it and you don't want to go through the Assets panel and delete them directly, you can right click and select delete unused files for upload and get rid of them in that way. All right, I'm going to open up the floor for questions. So these can be general questions. There was one about templates that we got at the top of the hour. Krista, if there's anything else that you see on Facebook, shout it out. If you're here in the Zoom session, go ahead and put it in chat. The question around templates was, let's see, how to look up for more templates in Muse. Let's talk about some of the ways you kind of get outside and look around and learn about Muse. If you're new to Muse, the website muse.adobe.com, it's a subdomain of adobe.com. It's managed by the Muse team. It tends to be a candy store. We feel like we don't get enough attention in things like adobe.com or some of the Creative Cloud Learn pages. So we'll put extra content here that may or may not be available in other places. One nice place to hang out is in the tutorial section on muse.adobe.com. As soon as I load, like I said, I'm stressing out the internet here. Give it a minute. Truly be kind. Tutorials. Okay. So if you go to muse.adobe.com/tutorials, that gets you there as well. And there's a section here called Starter Designs. And starter designs are full-on templates. So there's this group of them here. It's a full-on set of templates. There are 5 of them, and 2 of the 5 have been redone to support the responsive workflow. These are full websites. You're welcome to download them. You can customize them. They include, if you click on the Preview Help tab here, there's a whole bunch of very short little videos, like 1 or 2 or 3 minute videos, where I show you how to customize this template. So these are free from Muse. The other place to kind of check out what's out there for templates is on the resources page. Templates are tough to keep up with. We went ahead a few years back, and for widgets, there's over 1,000 widgets that work with Adobe Muse. We created a directory, the widget directory, so that you can easily find a particular widget you might be interested in. And it's nice in that you can come in and sort by the provider of the widget. You can sort by particular words or categories. You can also sort by a word that might occur in the description. These have previews and they're downloadable. Adobe makes no money from this. We just pass through. There's some free content that's here as well, but there's some wonderful widget developers that maintain this. We thought about doing this for templates, but it's really hard to categorize and organize templates well. What we do is in the resources page of the site, if you scroll on down, there's a section for templates and widgets, and you can see a number of the providers that do sell templates or give away templates. Another big one is ThemeForest, seems to have many Muse designs at a broad range of prices. Okay, I see a couple questions that have come up here. I'm going to look real quick. Is there a way to delete unused layers in the same way you can delete unused colors? Suzanne, I need a little bit more context with that. I'm trying to understand when you would have a layer. So I probably can make up a story here. Let's say I'm here in Muse and I've gone in. So if I look at the rowing website and I go to an individual page, I've set up a set of layers. So if I come to the layers panel, notice I have, for me, it's a stacking order that shoots across master pages and individual pages. So the header sits on top of a widget layer, which sits on top of a page layer, that sits on top of a footer layer. If I want to get rid of an unused layer, if I come in and select something on a particular page, so if I select it and make sure this checkbox is selected, if I hit delete, that layer in essence goes away. There shouldn't be any unused layers on a page if there's no content in that layer. A layer group, for example, let's say I have nothing on my widgets layer. I can come in to delete it. It's probably going to alert me. Notice that it's saying you're going to mess up 5 different pages in your site. Are you really sure you want to delete this layer group across multiple pages? So that happens. What we don't have is the ability to say, well, show me the 5 pages where there is content so that I can see it. If you switch between pages, you'll see the content appear. It's possible to have certain pages that don't have any of the layer group reflected. It'll show up, but you won't see any content under it. I'm not positive that answered your question, but I tried. I'd like it for paragraph styles and graphic styles to come in and delete all unused. What happens is if you go and select something that's not being used, you can delete it. If it is being used, it alerts you to tell you you need to replace it with something else. So it's pretty good, but it'd be nice to just clean all those old ones out as well, I would think. All right, we are right at the top of the hour. As I mentioned, this is kind of a nuts and bolts for Muse basic session. I hope I didn't jump around too much. I'm going to actually put up a poll for folks that are attending the session live here on Zoom. Let me put that up there, see if I met your expectations. You're welcome to put into the comments if there was something that we didn't cover that you wish we'd have covered. Let me know. I can approve this session for sure. 2 weeks from now, we're going to do one of my favorite topics, which is typography and the web. There's a designer, as I mentioned, Aaron Lawrence. At Max this past year, he did an amazing session where he built out a Muse website, and he has a whole focus area. It's an extensive typography example site, and he built out a whole section on responsive design, best practices around font sizes, and also some amazing tricks that you can do with typography and responsive design in Muse. So we're going to do that session 2 weeks from today. Thank you, everyone, for your time. Thanks for hanging in with us as we test different technologies. Let us know how Facebook Live worked for you this time. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks.